Hey guys, this is Unexceptional Rounder, and today I have a classroom video that is part of my 6max Fundamentals series on Preflop opening ranges. I want to start by pointing out that these ranges are simply a starting point until you have more information about the table. I won't be covering adjustments in this video, but we will discuss how to adjust these ranges in the future. These ranges are by no means conclusive or absolute, but it will clean up any huge preflop range leaks you may not even know you have. Let's start with our under the gun range, or early position. Here, you want a tight range of hands due to the fact that you have very little information and don't know what opponent you might end up against, how many, or what relative position they will have on you. For all these reasons, it is wise to err on the tight side. That being said, if you are too tight, you won't get action except from better hands. Let's look at a good tight aggressive range. You may notice some interesting things right away. I've left out 2s through 4s in this range. It's my personal preference and something that you may want to include. I have found that these hands don't perform that well for me, and therefore I don't always open them. One of the reasons is that people often call early position raises with pocket pairs. So sometimes when you hit your set, these opponents will have a better set. By leaving them out, you lessen your chances of facing set over set with bottom set, which may seem negligible or scared, but again, it's just my current disposition on the matter. Feel free to add them if you disagree. My open raise size is 3.5 big blinds. This is relatively standard, but is large enough to decrease the odds opponents have to call light and try to hit a big hand against my range. I want to be raising a large enough size to get the pot size up pre-flop to make for bigger overall pots with my tightest hand range. I also feel that suited aces will play better than offsuit because, again, much of our opponent's range will consist of ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-10, and you will be in a tough spot. However, the suited hands will offer you more options for continuing when you miss your ace. This same concept applies to suited kings and queens. The idea with our range here is to keep our opponents guessing and let our aggression force them into making mistakes after the flop. On our middle position range, or hijack, we want to still be relatively tight, but we have one less player to worry about. This represents about 17% more information than we have from early position. Here, I add back in 2s through 4s and suited aces down to ace-5, but only ace-10 offsuit, because it doesn't really play very well when called and we are out of position. We also add more suited connectors to balance out our range and make it harder for our opponents to read our play post-flop, aka deception. Last note is that while this may look like a linear increase, it is actually a 33% wider range than our under the gun range. So with 10% greater chance of position and 17% more information, increasing your range by a third seems about right. Keep in mind, this is an absolute increase of only 6% more hands. For my raise size, I will make it 3 big blinds. As my range gets lighter, I want to have a better price to steal and keep the pot smaller relative to the absolute strength of my hand range. Okay, enough about that. Let's talk about the cutoff, which is where things get more interesting. As you can see, the cutoff is where we really start opening up. As you can imagine, in the above discussion, it makes sense to really increase our range in the cutoff because this is the first position where there are more players remaining that will be out of position against us post-flop than have position on us. After making that statement, I should point out that I'm really speaking theoretically on these numbers, as your opponent's ranges reflect their own position and metagame dynamics. This is to illustrate only the theories and justifications of the ranges and what thoughts go into them. This is not to suggest that you will end up in position 2/3 of the time someone calls your cutoff open. In the cutoff, we are really opening up by throwing in some suited gappers like 10-8 suited, Jack-8 suited, as well as hands like Jack-10 offsuit and 10-9 offsuit. We can open any suited ace, but we should consider how many opponents will be calling with aces before opening our smaller offsuit and sometimes suited aces. This range will be very liquid in-game because it depends so much on our opponents. We will get into that more but for now, assume a table full of unknown players. This range will be a good place to start pressuring opponents aggressively. I raised to 2.5 big blinds in the cutoff because I want a better price to seal the blinds with my weaker hands and a smaller pot until I have more information in the hand. On the button, you are opening based mostly on the 2 opponents you see in the blinds. Because you will have post-flop position 100% of the time, you can open a much wider range of hands. Your opponents will generally be tighter when playing out of position, but even when they are not, you will have up to 3 streets to play post-flop in position. As far as our range goes, you want to stick mostly with suited hands that can make a straight. Your offsuit hand should also be capable of making a straight or a decent top pair. These hands will allow for more aggressive play when called and more possible calling hands when 3-bet preflop. There is some debate about optimal raise size from the button, but I've been min raising the button with success. The min raise works well because you are risking only 2 big blinds to win 1.5, which means if both your opponents fold 57% of the time, you show an immediate profit. 2 opponents who each fold to steal 80% or more should both fold 64% of the time. So your min raise would show an immediate profit if it doesn't cause them to open up their range. I don't want to get into steal dynamics yet, as it is complex and will be covered in depth in a future video. As with the button, your small blind range will be totally opponent based. However, you have to start somewhere if you have little or no information on your opponent. Here, your steal odds are even better, but you face one huge difference. Your opponent has position on you right now, and will have position post-flop. This makes it so that you will probably not be able to profit as much post-flop when called, and you have to tighten up your 3-bet calling range as well. You might notice this looks similar to your cutoff range, which is because until you know something about your opponent, you should play relatively straightforward in the small blind. Mostly cards with top pair value or strong suited connectors that play well post-flop. Once you know something about your opponent, this can all change. As far as your raise size goes, there's debate here about 3 big blinds versus 4 big blinds. I have had success raising 3 big blinds, which gives better odds to steal. If you raise 3 big blinds, you break even when your opponent folds 63% of the time. This means that if your opponent folds 63%, you would make money just checking down all your hands in your range and folding to any bet. Now, there are a lot of hands that could do better with post-flop, such as ace-ace. As soon as you have an idea that your opponent is folding more than 50% of his hands, you should start opening much wider than the range shown here. This covers the basic reasoning behind the default starting ranges I use and should help anyone who is struggling with preflop open decisions. If you would like a printable version of this chart, you can click the annotation on the screen to get it. You may notice a lot of buttons on this page. As these videos are released, annotations will be added. Subscribe to see when the newest strategy videos on 6max online cash games are released. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can let me know what you think or ask questions in the comments below. Oh, and you can hit the like button too. That would be cool. I'll see you guys for Squeeze Play live on twitch.tv/unexceptionalrounder at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And until next time, keep on grinding.